Karen, I am so thrilled to have you today. Thank you so much for joining me.
Well, thank you for having me.
This is going to be so fun. So I was just telling you before we hit record, you were one of my favorite sessions at my favorite conference a couple of years ago. You spoke at She Speaks about sticky statements and all kinds of fun things. It was so helpful to me. And it's fun now to be in a totally different place. And you've got this book coming out and we get to talk about it today. And man, some of those principles that you talked about, I can see that ring true. And I read about your book and you just do such a fabulous job with all those things. And so today we get to talk about your new book, Make Their Day, 101 Simple, Powerful Ways to Love Others Well. And I would love for you to start by just sharing a little bit about why this seemed like, man, that's that next right message that I need to put into the world.
Well, most recently, I've been writing about hospitality and about leaning in and listening to people and looking for ways to bless them rather than live in our often self-centered society. You know, everything's about ourself, our selfie pictures, taking pictures of what we're eating, what we're doing. And sometimes it's easy to go about life thinking it's all about you, rather than being on the lookout for people that you can bless and that you can encourage. And so my last couple of books have kind of had that theme with hospitality and listening and doing things for others. But I got so many people that said, we love all of this. And there were some good ideas, but we're out of ideas. We already did the ideas you suggested. So they wanted just an idea book. So I just, with my publisher, came up with this idea for putting together 101 simple things for people to do. So if you've ever thought, wow, I wish I should really do something for them, this is like 101 somethings to do for people.
That is awesome. Okay. I love this. And, you know, most of us kind of have this, at least to some degree, a desire to be remembered as, you know, that woman who scatters kindness wherever she goes. But how would you encourage listeners, maybe in the everyday moments, how do we not miss those opportunities that God gives us? How would you encourage people there?
Well, I think we need to be on the lookout for them. And I learned to do this. I'm going to tell a quick little story. I learned to do this from my mom, actually. My mom and I are not the same personalities at all. I'm extremely talkative. My husband always teases that he's going to put a period on my tombstone because I'll finally be done talking. My mom's just really quiet and shy. But I saw her live this way where she was just always on the lookout for other people. And I remember one time going to her after school one day in middle school. I still don't remember what happened, if I got left off the slumber party list or what it was, but I was upset. And I remember my mom gave me a little piece of advice I've never forgotten. She said, whenever you feel like circumstances aren't going your way and life's got you down, you need to remember that there's always someone out there who has it worse off than you. So here's what you do. You go find that person and you do something to make their day. And in a strange way, it makes yours as well. And so I learned from her to quit being so attentive to the people, especially in our day and age of social media, that seem to have life better off than you and thinking, wow, gee, must be nice. No, those are the wrong people to be looking at. Go find someone who surely doesn't have life as well off as you do financially or emotionally or relationally or whatever it is. And think of something to do to encourage them. And it helps you. She used to always say, get your eyes off yourself, honey. It does. It helps you get your eyes off yourself. And it suddenly makes life an adventure.
That's so good. And I think we have had maybe a more unique opportunity to do that this year than we probably ever have. Well, this year, meaning 2020, which was last year by the time we're talking about this actual conversation. I remember when we were in quarantine and everybody was locked down, and really the only people I was face to face interacting with was, you know, the woman checking me out at the grocery store or Walgreens and things like that. And I just remember praying, Lord, help me not miss her. Because she's not had a great day. You know, everybody's out of toilet paper and the world's gone a little mad. And so help me just not miss being able to speak life in those, 2 minutes when she's scanning my items. And that's just been a big prayer of mine, especially as crazy as the world has always been, but definitely is in this season. And so, something that comes to mind when I read books, that are encouraging us to encourage other people and kind of equipping us in that is just that reader or that listener who they want to be more thoughtful. They want that, but they feel as if maybe it's just not my personality to be that encourager. How would you speak into that girl?
Yeah, just like I was saying, my mom and I are very different personalities. just lean into your personality and how you roll. We don't have to all do things the same way. I tend to encourage people more with my words and with, taking them to do something fun if they're down. My mom's just very quiet. She just shows up and silently serves. Like when I first had a baby and I was thinking, what in the world how did I ever think this was a good idea? I'm exhausted. I can't keep up on my housework. The baby's up all night. And my mom just showed up and she didn't say a whole lot. I had other people that were giving me advice and saying things and trying to cheer me up. She just started doing the laundry and started doing the dishes and put supper in the crock pot. And she just quietly served because she's a quiet person. So I think whatever it is that you feel is a strength in your personality, because every personality type has strengths, just lean into that and think of ways to serve based on your personality. If you think that making someone else's day and encouraging others has to always use your words and you're not a person who talks a lot, then you're just going to use it as an excuse to not ever do anything at all. But we all have ways that we roll and things that we do that do brighten others' days and do encourage them. So just find it based on how you're.
That's so good. It makes me think of love languages. So I know even my husband and I had this conversation recently, and it always seems this way, doesn't it? Where our spouses and us have total opposite ends of the spectrum in love languages.
Oh.
So I have always been a mix of words of affirmation, and physical touches came a little later on. I realized that once I was married, that's huge for me. But his are acts of service and gift giving. And we just kind of had gotten to a point where we just realized we weren't taking note of how the other one was loving us well. And I was so convicted about that. And it's so helpful when I think we realize like what that language is for us, but then also what someone else's language is, so that we know how maybe we can serve them. And that's even challenging sometimes when it's not your preferred method. I'd love to kind of talk through like, what are some of those, maybe just a couple unique ways from the book. I don't want you to give too much away because I want people to go buy the book, but tell us a couple of unique ideas of how we could celebrate our friends in kind of a unique way.
Well, I'll tell a method that will then generate two ideas from it. So this again is something I saw my mom do, but I never really knew what it was called until my husband and I were in a small group with a group leader named Michael, and he gave a term to it. And it's always stuck with me. And it's learning to listen for heart drops. Now, a heart drop is when someone says something without really saying it. Like you're kind of listening between the lines. And maybe, for example, you have a friend who's telling you that their husband has some medical tests and they're going to get the results back next Thursday. And they don't say, and I'm really anxious about it, but you can sense from how they're talking that they are. So whip out your phone and in your calendar, on your reminders, whatever app you use on your phone, set some sort of reminder or alarm that tells you next Thursday, you want to reach out to that person. You want to either call them or text them and say, hey, I've been thinking and praying about you or praying for you. How did those tests turn out? And so I've learned to do this in my own life. I remember also not just listening for people saying things without saying things, but also a heart drop can just be a random piece of information. For example, I once went out to coffee with one of my friends. I heard her rattle off her long, high maintenance coffee order. And for some reason, I just felt like the Lord said, put that in your phone. And so I did. And this was in the spring. Well, fast forward to that fall, I knew that her only child was going off to college and was going to be a couple hours away, and she wasn't going to be seeing him every day. And it was going to be a really hard day for her that day because they dropped him off the night before and it was the first day of school. So she was going to see the school buses going by her house. So I showed up on her front porch about 8 a.m. with 2 coffees and a box of Kleenex. And I said, hey, if you need somebody to cry with, I'm here for you. And she said, oh, you're so sweet. What did you bring me, a mocha? And I said, no, I brought you and I rattled off her long, high maintenance coffee order. And she said, how did you know? And I said, because the last time we were out, I put it in my phone. Or I remember also developing this habit, and it's something I do regularly now, of kind of visually getting a little heart drop whenever I go to a funeral. I'll look at the program that they give to everyone, and I will go home and put in my calendar what would have been that person who passed away, what would have been their birthday, or maybe their wedding anniversary. So I have a friend who was super close to her father. Every year on his birthday, he was well into his 80s. They would go walk 2 miles. He walked right up until about when he died. And she would always make him a homemade carrot cake. Well, he died in the fall. His birthday was the next spring. I showed up on what would have been his birthday on her front porch with my walking shoes on and a homemade carrot cake. And I said, hey, I'm here. we want to go for a walk. And she just bawled and she said, how did you know? And I'm like, because silly, I wrote it down, so it's just being attentive and listening for those times when people are saying things without really saying it, or writing down these random pieces of information or these special dates, and then putting it in your calendar, making a point to reach out and do something.
Gosh, that's so good. That's such a good idea. And it just makes me think of the word intentionality. And that was a couple of years ago. I always ask the Lord to give me a word for the year. And a couple of years ago, it was intentional. And that was something that I really tried to be thoughtful about that year. But this is a good reminder for me because I don't want to miss those moments. And it's really in those everyday, in that moment in the coffee shop that you think, that's it. I got to write that down so that I don't forget. And it could be coffee. It could be anything like that. I think just being aware of your people and, things that they love and moments that mean a lot to them and things like that. That's so good. I love it. And what's coming to mind for me too is sometimes life gets so, quote, busy. We're going to be in the beginning of a new year when this conversation comes out. Sometimes life gets so busy that it can be difficult to reconnect with our friends and family. Finding that time can be hard. So how do we prioritize this in the middle of a crazy season or a busy life?
I think it's like anything that you think is important, you put it on your schedule. If you think it's important to get your teeth cleaned every 6 months and have your kids get their teeth cleaned every 6 months, you put it on your schedule. I remember when I was first married, my quote unquote home office was a little section in our unfinished basement where I had a card table and a folding chair, and I had an old cork board I got at a garage sale for $2. And I had on that cork board, say that 5 times fast, a little note that just had different people's names on it. In my family, my grandparents were still alive. At that time, I had their names on it. I had my mother-in-law and father-in-law. I just got married. I had their names on it. And at the top of it, it said, have you written or called? And then it had their names. And so I saw that ever before me. And I would make a point to once a week, either call or write a handwritten note. Anybody remember handwritten notes? To somebody once a week. And so now I do it with my phone. Every first of the month, I just have a reminder that goes off and it just says, who are you going to bless this month? And so I'll think of one person that month that I might know is going through a hard time or has just moved to a new town or whatever it is. And then I look over my schedule for the month and see when is there a time frame where I could do something more than just a quick text or a quick phone call, but maybe really take time to put together a little gift basket in a box and mail it to them, or do something, take them out for coffee or whatever. And so it's not a huge amount when you think about it at the end of the year, doing that 12 times, but it can so change the course of someone's day when you take time to reach out and just let them know, hey, I see you, I notice you, and I care.
Yeah. Oh, that's so good. And this is going to be coming out several weeks after I have gotten COVID. So nobody worry. I have recovered. I'm fine. Everything's fine. However, I tested positive in the fall of 2020 for COVID-19. And one of our church members, my husband's a pastor. We live in a very small town, just to set the stage. But one of our church members just showed up on our front doorstep with this goodie bag full of like a bath bomb and some gingerbread Oreos. And she just said, I just want you to have something to look forward to when you do get your taste back, and you can taste these. They're my favorite. I was just on my way to the doctor, and I thought I'd just drop this off on my way. And that meant so much to me. After, for days on end, the only person I've actually spoken to is my husband in person. And it just meant so much to see her for 5 minutes, and I just was so reminded, man, I want to be aware of those times when I can do that for other people. So I love everything about this conversation.
Right.
Kind of as I think into 2021, I don't think all the world's problems are going to be solved, right? And another kind of phrase I see when I looked at the book was sprinkling kindness in a culture of cruel. So how do we keep a good perspective in all of this? And how do we do this well when we seem to feel as if we're in a culture of cruel?
Yeah. Sometimes I just can't believe, maybe it's because I'm over 40 and I'm old. I don't know. But I look back on the time in society when even if you've, vehemently disagreed with someone, you were still kind. I mean, I remember growing up in a neighborhood where there were all sorts of political signs, and Some people voted for one side, some people voted for the other side, but everyone treated each other with kindness and, would help shovel their driveway if they needed it or whatever. But now it just seems like we're always giving our unsolicited opinion, especially in this day and age of social media. And we're just hurling hate instead of being kind. And I always think of the story in the book of Acts. I'm terrible at remembering what chapter, but when Paul and his companions get shipwrecked off the coast of a little island called Malta, they go on shore at the island, and it says that the islanders showed them unusual kindness, and they built them a fire. And then it says, because they were cold. And I look at that and think, they showed him unusual kindness. They built him a fire. They fed him. And the reason was because it was rainy. Oh, it was rainy and cold. And I thought, how many times do we just do something nice for someone just because they need it without going, I think of those islanders. They didn't go, now, wait a minute. We got to check this guy out. What does he believe politically? What does he think about different societal issues? What side of the coin does he fall on some of these hot topics of the day? No, they saw people who were out in the rain and it was cold. And so they built him a fire and fed him just because they needed it. So we can learn to do kind things for others we completely disagree with just because they need it. And I love when I see that there's a protest going on and there's two sides, that are kind of, I don't love seeing that they're clashing, but I love when this happens, when there is something like that going on, where one side shows up with hot cocoa and donuts and says, hey, can we just talk? We just want to, give you something to drink and something to eat. And can we just put our signs down and quit yelling and screaming across the street? And can we just talk? Let's just talk. Because, everyone has opinions on things. And we sometimes think that their opinions need to exactly mirror ours on everything. And I'm not talking about crucial items that are in the Bible, even just small things. I just have seen communities torn apart by different issues rather than just learning to be kind and thoughtful and treat others with respect, just like Jesus did. He treated others with kindness and respect, regardless of who they were, simply because they were people, not for any other reason. But we've kind of lost that in our society today, I think.
I called my mom before the election, and I just remember almost joking, but not joking, saying to her, I just don't remember elections being like this when I was a kid. Like, was it this bad and I just didn't know? And she said, no, honey, this is vastly different than any other election that I've seen before. And so we are about to continue this conversation over on our Patreon community, which I can't wait for. So listeners can go over and listen to the last little bit of our conversation there. But Karen, I am so excited about this book and how you're just going to equip people to encourage people. Well, this is going to be so awesome. So thank you so much for being my guest today.
Thank you for having me.